Hello, I'm Joe Walensky from WritersUA, and I'm talking with some of the many speakers who will be at our event coming up, one of our WritersUA on the Road events in Austin, which takes place in January. And I'm visiting today with Dave Gash. Hello, Dave.
Hey Joe, how's it going?
It's going okay. So, where are you talking to us from today?
I am in San Diego County, California.
So that broke up just slightly. So, what's your town again?
San Diego.
Oh, San Diego. Okay. All right. Well, it's good to see you again. If you're not familiar with Dave, Dave's been involved in the user assistance arena for quite a long time. He's a popular speaker at our various events, so I'm glad to be working with you again. So, just catching up. What are some of the things that you're working on lately?
Well, for the last couple of years or so, I've been working for both Google and Microsoft. I'm working on a big um, uh, multi-company initiative called Web Platform Docs. And this is a huge initiative that Mozilla, Microsoft, Google, Nokia, W3C, and all the heavy hitters in technology are all involved in this. And it's an attempt to do nothing less than document the web. We're
Oh, that's no
focusing
big deal. Yeah.
exactly. We're focusing on literally tens of thousands of articles from both Microsoft Developer Network and Mozilla Developer Network, and documenting CSS, JavaScript, HTML, all kinds of API documentation, functions, properties, methods, and that sort of thing. And I've been doing literally thousands of those over the last few years.
So what specifically is the type of thing that you've been working on?
Well, I'm going through a large set of HTML5 and CSS3 objects and properties and methods and reviewing the content against the W3C specs for accuracy, checking or adding examples, example code for the various functions and so on. And to me, it's the very definition of because you have to be able to because the are these are prose articles. You have to be able to write in a way that's accessible to users, but at the same time you have to be very technical and understand what a specific API does, be able to read the W3C specs and make sure that the articles and tutorials match the specs and so on. So it's a very good balance between being technical and being a writer.
Yeah, I've always thought that area is really challenging because people that have a good understanding of a particular domain, uh, they kind of want information in a different way from consumer end user. A lot of times it might be just show me an example and I'll move forward, or just how does this relate to that, and less so maybe a step by step procedure. But I mean, what are some of the things that you've noticed or come across in working with your audience that's been particularly challenging?
Well, I'm working with documentation that is really intended for web developers, and these folks are in, let's say, the middle ground between your general end user and say people who actually write browsers. So they're writing web applications, they're writing games, they're writing apps of different kinds, and they need this API documentation because the actual W3C specs are just too much to wade through for your typical programmer. They're really intended for people like Mozilla or Microsoft who are really writing browsers, and that's not who this documentation is for. These docs are for people um, who are writing web applications and need sort of an set to understand how to use the functions and methods and the properties of the APIs.
Now, you you're quite accomplished in terms of your experience with various programming languages, and I was just wondering, in in the work that you're doing now, the people that you're working with, like how would you rate the level of experience that one would need with programming languages to be doing the API docs, that you're involved with now? Because I think there's a kind of broad range of levels of competency, and I think a lot of people are kind of looking at that area to see if they might have the skills or can acquire the skills to get into that.
That is sure. And one of the things that I have to be careful about when I'm writing either reference documentation or particularly tutorials, and I've written quite a number of those, I have to be careful not to talk down to the programmers who will be reading this, but at the same time, I have to be technical enough to answer questions. And so that's where the combination of being a technician and being a writer comes into play. um, Generally speaking, the audience for this documentation will be people with moderate experience in, say, JavaScript or CSS and HTML. So we have to write not for the raw novice and not for the many-year expert. If I, for example, or you wanted to go write a web application to get some function done for users, we would have to find documentation that explains how to use the different APIs, things that we need to do, audio, video, um, and those kinds of interfaces to the browser. And so we need that mid-level of documentation to explain to us how to do that. And that level has to be neither too simple nor too complex.
And where do you think people that are doing the type of work that you're doing, where they need to be in terms of their experience level with in working with and understanding code and frameworks?
Ah, well, for people who are doing pretty much what I'm doing, and there are a few of us out there scattered around the globe, actually, as it turns out. Um, those folks have to be very, very technical. They have to really understand how the APIs work. They have to be able to read the W3 specs directly and understand how to translate that into less technical documentation. So it's a very technical job, but at the same time, you have to be able to construct meaningful prose that explains what these APIs do, and you have to be able to construct from scratch or correct code examples in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that maybe an earlier author of a given article may have put into an article or a page. You have to be able to look at those examples, deconstruct them, test them, make sure that they not only operate correctly but also operate per the W3C specs. So so people who are doing my job have to be very, very technical, but also have to be decent writers.
Well, one of the topics that you're going to discuss at the Austin event is related to HTML5 and latest things going on with the cascading style sheet specs. So, I mean, just generally, what are some of the things that you think are important for people to know about the latest in those standards, and how does that manifest itself in the work that we do?
That's a question. That's why I signed this particular set. One of the things that came by is that the size, the sheer volume of the specs can be daunting, and your everyday workaday technical writer who has to provide content on a daily basis may be interested in this, but the whole thing can just be enormously daunting because you think, oh my God, there's so much to HTML5 and CSS3. It's like a whole new, hesitate to use the word paradigm, but that's kind of the feeling a lot of times. And my point in this session is to help people understand that HTML5 and CSS3 aren't a single thing that you have to learn all at once. There are a whole bunch of things. There are many things. There's lots of features involved. And a lot of these features are useful to maybe guys like me who are programmers who want to do, you know, video or audio or graphics or games or something. But those features are not necessarily useful to your general everyday content provider writer. So what I've done in this session is I've picked out a set of HTML5 tags called semantic structural tags, and we'll look at those, see how we can use them to help mark up our content in a more semantic, more logical, reasonable way. And in that way, we'll just kind of get an introduction to HTML5 and some of the features that we might use. In that same session, then we'll also look at a couple of CSS3 features, again, with an eye towards getting the point across that you don't have to learn everything all at once. You can learn certain pieces of HTML5, certain new techniques in CSS3, and apply them right now and get a lot of good out of it. So the last thing that this session does then is we take an HTML4 CSS2 page and we migrate that page, keeping the content, but changing the tags and changing the styles so that we migrate it to HTML5 and CSS3. This is, again, just to give regular content providers an idea of a fairly easy way to step into these new technologies.
The other topic that you're going to be discussing is embedded help, and
Yeah.
a lot of people have, well, there's different definitions about what that means, what that consists of, and so in this particular situation, what are you going to be focusing on?
Well, I actually enjoy this session a lot because in recent conferences that I've spoken at and attended, embedded help sessions and presentations, they are, by and large, they're conceptual overviews or design analyses. In other words, they will ask and answer questions like, is embedded help a good idea? Why is it a good idea? What sort of philosophies does it support? You know, it supports like progressive disclosure and just enough and those kinds of things. Um, those sorts of presentations will look at delivery devices like, do you want to use sliders? Do you want to use drop in panels? Do you want to use expanders? And talk about um, embedded help from a philosophical or from a design perspective. Now, those are all good sessions, and those are conversations that we really definitely need to have. But none of those sessions really tell me how do I do it. What I want to know um, is what does it take to accomplish that. So that's why I developed this session, because it's not a why to philosophical session. It's a very practical, very how to, very nuts and bolts session that will show us exactly how to prepare for the help. Uh, to store it. In fact, I different ways. One way, we will store the embedded help in HTML pages, and in the other demo, we'll store the embedded help in an XML file. And then we'll actually go through what code does it really take to go out and grab this embedded help and bring it back in so that it's available to the application. And then we'll show how to take that embedded help content then and how it changes from object to object on the screen, and take that embedded help and then just sort of poke it into a box on the screen. So again, this is not a design session. This is a very practical, what code does it take to accomplish this? As you well know, my primary job in your conferences is to be the code guy and the how-to guy. So we will not explore whether it's a good idea or why it's a good idea, but instead, actually, how do I get this done? How do I create my embedded help? How do I store it? How do I retrieve it? And how do I put it into an application? That's what this session is about.
Have you noticed? I don't know if if you still get an opportunity to check out what's going on with various authoring tools, but do you have a sense of how people are are using the types of techniques that you talk about? What tools they're using to be able to implement things?
Well, that is also a very good question, and I'm not really seeing a great deal of support
You were dry.
directly.
Yeah, you're dropping out there,
Oh,
so
sorry.
maybe just start in again.
All right. I'm not really seeing a lot of embedded help support directly in authoring tools. If you know the techniques and if you know the code that's required to get it done, you can work it out so that you can do embedded help, um, or at least prepare it correctly. I'm not seeing much direct support in tools like Flare or Oxygen or XMetal, but the technologies are there. So again, if you have seen my presentation on embedded help, if you understand what it takes to prepare the content, you can certainly use RoboHelp or Flare or Frame or Oxygen or XMetal or whatever tool you may happen to have to correctly prepare the text so that your developers can insert a little bit of code and go out, reach out, and obtain that help text for you. So I think it's maybe not a help authoring tool's job specifically to um, directly support embedded help, but they all support the technologies that allow you to use the techniques in order to produce embedded help, if that makes sense.
Yep. All right. Great.
All right.
Thanks. All right. Cool. Well, I think we covered a lot of things. So I look forward to seeing you in a couple of months in Austin.
I will be there. Good talking to you, Joe. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye bye.